Welcome to another second level question podcast, Debrief.
It's your boy, Aaron.
Aaron.
Sure, it's spelled A-R-I-N, so it doesn't really work. I'm a Youth Lab missionary. This is Seth.
The other Youth Alive guy.
We got a special podcast today, Sether.
Yes, we have a pretty fun one, even though it's a serious topic. So we're going to get through it a little bit.
Yeah.
This is based on a conversation that you had with Stephanie Dyes, like late at night through a Zoom call.
Yes. We really want to have the conversation. She's a licensed therapist. She focuses on young adults and teens and stuff like that. And so we want to talk about mental health and faith and stuff because we tried to talk about that at youth conference. And she thought we could have gone a little further at youth conference, and I was interested because all the students that we talk to are all talking about mental health, right?
Yeah.
So it's just prevalent, and we could only fit it in at like a 9:30, which for us old people is old, is late, you know. So we were like, yeah, and so but then the conversation was so good, we actually talked about it for a while. But instead of dragging everybody through an hour and a half of a roller coaster ride of emotions.
Getting there.
We thought we'd take the highlights and give you guys the best of the best.
Yeah. So first off, you said it a little bit about revisiting because you wanted to go a little bit deeper with that. But we've already done a Dr. Dave DeMaster's podcast on mental health.
Yeah.
We talked, with Jeff Tasker about mental health, and I think there was another podcast about mental health with somebody. So
Sure.
Why bring it up again, even with the spiritual piece you talked about? Is there a larger reason why you wanted to bring this up again as a whole?
I think we talked about like different aspects of mental health. With Jeff, it was his identity and his story. With Dr. Dave, it was kind of like we kind of stuck on like ADHD stuff.
Yeah.
And so Stephanie was like an overall conversation from a licensed therapist. Dr. Dave, he's got his degrees too. Jeff was telling his story, but this is like, okay, you and I are not smart enough to talk about mental health. Like, look at me right now.
You're covered in paint.
I'm not the smart person. I'm the laborer. I'm the move it around guy. I'm not. So I wanted to talk to someone who knew what they were talking about. Kind of like, how do we get to the second level? Yeah. And not just make this like, hey, this is mental health. What are like the nuts and bolts that we need to know to be better at Jesus and mental health and all that stuff? That hard cut was for Davis, my son, who is here at the office. So he was needing a piece of chocolate, I think.
So there's a clip we want to show you. And Stephanie says something very interesting. So let's check out the clip really quick, and we'll be right back.
I always say like psychology is legitimately just the study of what God made. But God made the brain. Everything laid out in the Bible is a psychology concept as far as anything that relates to like bringing center and bringing peace. There is so many parallels, and science has just proven ways that God already set out way before psychologists ever came along.
Stephanie says psychology is the study of God, and as it's relating to centering, peace, calming, meditation, there's a lot of things in the Bible about that.
Yeah.
So what's happening in your mind as you're talking about this?
Well, so what she said made perfect sense to me, but I could get how other people would be like offended a little bit by it. It's kind of like chicken or the egg, which came first.
Okay.
Because she talked about there's so many people who are spiritual. People are all in on astrology, ghost, crystals, universe, good vibes, all that. None of that's a problem, right? Like, everybody's cool with that. But the second you say Jesus or God, people are like, Rick? Whoa. Right? They clinch up real hard. And my favorite joke my grandpa used to tell me is if you put a quarter between their butt cheeks, you would have got 5 nickels. That's an old Southern phrase for you.
That's good.
But if the whole idea is that if God is real and created us and knows who we are, then he knows about our emotions and he knows how we're going to deal with those emotions. So the study of understanding yourself would be a subcategory of God.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like if I am super into what the weather's going to be like or my son is super into animals,
Yeah.
right? Like animals are cool. The fact that I know that an alligator's bite pressure is like 800 psi or whatever,
Yes.
like that's awesome. But that's a reflection of God's awesomeness,
Right.
right? And so I think that's what she was saying is like anytime that you're digging into psychology by itself is not the ultimate end-all be-all.
Yeah.
Therapy by itself is not the end-all be-all. The reason those things work is because those things are pointing to the God that makes them work.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So talking about the study of God and centering and moving, and everybody's got this spiritual kind of thing that's happening. So we're kind of redirecting that as it relates to mental health. You had talked about Pastor John in a sermon recently, talked about perseverance.
Yeah.
And that perseverance is not the absence of struggle, that it is the right action in the midst of struggle.
Yeah.
So we're talking about mental health and psychology, and it's the study of God. And then we put perseverance in, okay, we don't want to have struggle. We hate
Sure.
struggle. Life sucks, but struggle happens. So what is Pastor John saying about this struggle, perseverance
yeah.
battle?
Because the line that I said made sense to me because I heard a whole sermon about it, but I
Right.
could get how watching in the clip, you're like, what was that? And the line is, when's the last time that you were going through something difficult and you're persevering and someone said, how are you so joyful? Or how are you so at peace? And what he was getting to there is, in your life, there's a lot of things that you will do that will make your life suck. You will make mistakes and it'll make your life suck.
Yep.
And you'll have to work through it. Then there's other things where life just sucks. You know, they're like someone gets sick, you get hurt, bad things happen, and you're going to have to persevere. How we persevere through it is the margin for us to witness to other people.
Yeah.
Right? Because you and I can go through the same thing. I'm a believer, you're not a believer, whatever.
Right.
Right? You and I even remember me and my friend both tried out for the basketball team in middle school, and I made it and he didn't.
Ooh.
Right? And I remember him, like he was a believer with me, right? Now another friend of ours, the third person, tried out as well. He didn't make it. So I'm happy because my life was going good.
Right.
Right? I'm the better athlete. That's all I'm saying. He was sad because he didn't make it. The third friend was mad because he didn't make it. But he responded better.
Yeah.
Right? My one friend blamed the coach, blamed the school, blamed the team, they just didn't like me, yada, 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 yada. This guy was like, you know what? It's going to be cool. Like, I'll be there to root you on. And he was so gracious and kind to me who was on the team.
Yeah.
I remember my friend being like, how can you be so nice? He's like, man, I love Aaron. I'm excited for him. Right? That margin is shocking to people.
Yeah.
Right? If you can go through trial, tragedy, and persevere well.
Yes.
That's a big deal. And that's one of the things Stephanie was talking about with how faith and mental health go together.
Yeah.
Is a lot of our life, the American dream is no struggle.
Right.
Right? Like how much money is enough, Seth?
Excellent question. I have no idea.
More.
I mean, I could settle for $1 million, but I'd want more after that.
I'd get him. I could spend $1 million like that.
Yes.
Right? Like
I think my Amazon card is already ready to spend $1 million.
like someone goes like, here's 10 grand. It would be gone tomorrow.
Yes.
You know,
you're right.
like it's just there's never enough. So, and I'm never happy enough. I'm never, there's always this desire to just have more. So instead of making our focus on trying to remove the bad parts of our life.
Yeah.
Stephanie was talking about, and I was kind of commenting on, that's really what we all try and do.
Yeah.
Right? But a better way to do it is to become people who persevere through those things better instead of trying to let perseverance grow us.
Yeah. Something that you did say in there, you asked the question or Pastor John asked the question, why are you so joyful? And another comment that you made, or that he made, was that you're generous in the midst of trying to persevere.
Sure.
And one of the fruits of the Spirit is long suffering. Now, we don't like to talk about that a lot, but we have a mutual friend who's had 5 miscarriages.
Yeah.
And then had a baby, and we're all ecstatic, but I think after 3, maybe even after 2, I'd be done.
Mm-hmm.
But they're a great example of being generous in long suffering and having joy and even ready to go again, because I have a friend that I've known for several years that had 1 miscarriage and a marriage ended because of it. And so, like, as we're looking at the mental health parts of these things, you move into a part of the conversation where there's theology and practice. And you ask the question, and I think it's our second level question, it's what's the missing piece between we go from a friend having 5 miscarriages, being generous and joyful and celebrating you who are getting ready to have another kid, and then them like, okay, God, why did you take 5? And so how do we kind of wrap this together for somebody who is struggling with mental health or even their faith and moving forward in that? What's the missing piece for them and us as we move along in that process?
And you're sitting in front of 1,500 people, and you're making the correlations between theology and practice. You know, the counseling, the therapy, and scripture. What are the things as church people that we don't say, that we miss, that we need to say?
I think the number one thing that we really don't do is listen.
So I think the thing that kind of answers that second level question in the clip is to listen longer seems so simple. But Stephanie and I, one of the things we talked about, church, all my church people out there, love you so much. But we are not great at giving people a chance, or us as church people listening.
Yeah.
Think about church. Like, we're walking into a church service.
Sure.
You and I walk in the doors. Somebody's standing at the door like, hello, how's your day? They don't care. They just move on. The next person, hello, waving signs at you. You walk into the room or into the auditorium, into the sanctuary, whatever, and there's a band that someone does announcements to you. The band worships to you. This pastor preaches to you. The announcement video comes on to you, right?
Right.
And the only time you get a chance to respond genuinely and you speak and the church as a body listen is at the 3-minute altar call at the end of the service.
Yeah.
Where you're like, Lord, or Pastor, could you pray for financial blessing for me and my family? And then what do? They pray for you.
Yeah.
Right? So everything is done. We're trying to get information out as a church to people. We don't sit and listen very well. And there's a great book. We'll put it in the show notes. Right, Jonathan? Thank you. That's a great book called You're Not Listening. I can't remember the lady who wrote it, but she in the book she makes the case that what connects us to people is not speaking,
okay,
and getting our story out there and being heard. It's being the people who listen is what connects us, right? Yeah. I know you and I are friends because I've heard your stories. I've been there in the middle of your stories.
Yeah.
Right? You connect to, a lot of times people don't know their grandparents very well. Like, what separates a grandkid who knows a grandparent well and not? One who's spent time and listened, right? Most kids will speak to grandparents, right? But do you know your grandparent's story? So you want to listen longer. So the case that she made was that if we listened more, then you would feel more connected. And the thing that's eroding our mental health as a culture is that we don't feel connected. We feel isolated. So we feel by ourselves. And the reason we feel by ourselves is not that there's not people who are going to listen to us. Not that we can't communicate. We can communicate better than ever.
Yeah.
Right? You and I are doing a podcast right now. We're communicating.
Sure.
It's the fact that we don't listen enough. And so if we are people who listen more, and then she starts going into how, like, listening builds into empathy. And I think that's our next clip or close to it. And like that empathy that comes with listening is what makes everybody more gracious and kind. And it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're isolated and you have to compete, and it creates just this never-ending cycle of having to work for stuff, and that erodes your mental health. And so she was like, listen longer. And this is a great point that she made. She says, if you listen with someone who is safe longer, then you will feel your feelings longer. You'll feel your feelings less by yourself.
That's very good.
Right? And most of us want to do the opposite. We want to feel our feelings by ourselves with our music in on our bed, upset.
Yeah.
And we don't want to talk to people. Don't talk to me.
Which is like wallowing.
Yeah, we want to wallow in it. We want to feel it. It's like, I just need time. It's like, well, talk to somebody who's safe first for a longer amount of time. Don't do 5 minutes. Don't do a 2-minute altar call prayer. Find someone that you can really like unload on and they can hear you. Do that longer, and then you'll find that you won't wallow as long.
Yeah.
And that's a good point that she made for mental health. And Stephanie gives us some other like really good points to dig into, but that was one that stuck with me, was listen longer and feel your feelings longer. And that always helps.
Another great point she made in that piece too was, let me hold my struggle and my praise together.
Yeah, it was a great line.
It was so good. And because it causes you to think about, well, I can't praise in the midst of my struggle, but sometimes praise is a sacrifice. And
Sure.
so we've got to learn how to hold those together. And it was so, I won't do it justice, but when you hear it played, how she says it is so beautiful, because she's talking about her own struggle and story. And she talks about, having a conversation with her mom about, will you just let me be? And
Yeah, because as a church person, her mom's trying to fix it.
yeah,
Her mom's like, well, come on, let's put on the worship music, let's pray, let's do the thing, let's do all this stuff. She's like, can I just feel this for a minute?
so a practical question would be, if we're just feeling this for a minute, how does that look different than sitting on my bed with my head and going, I'm just here wallowing in it? How does that look?
Intentionality.
There it is.
One, you're just letting your emotions roll. Another one, you are identifying, all right, for a little bit, I'm going to figure out what the heck I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we talked about that was super good that won't make the clips is God wants us to submit things to him, right? If you're feeling pain, he wants you to submit the pain. But if you don't know that you're feeling pain, you can't submit it. You have to identify it before you can submit it to him.
Sure.
And most of the time we go up to an altar, we go up to a moment with Jesus, and we go, God, help me. And he's like, okay, how? And we're like, I don't know, just help me. and it's like, you've got to go through the work to understand, okay, the way that my mom reacted really triggered me in this way.
Yeah.
It made me feel these feelings. And because I'm feeling these feelings, this is the kind of prayer that I need to pray.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that I need to do. These are the steps I need to make. And that's what therapy is.
Yeah.
And Stephanie has a great line again where she goes, a bad therapist gives you advice. A good therapist knows you already have the answers. You got to find them. And that's why psychology and therapy is just a reflection of who God is.
Yeah.
Right? That's why it all ties in, because you are acknowledging that you're feeling emotions that God has given you.
Yeah.
Emotions, I think she calls them, they're just stop signs or red flags, she said. If you're feeling mad, that's a sign that something is off.
Right.
Right? And so then you've got to figure out what that thing is. And then the faith part is going, okay, now I need to submit that to Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't want to just get rid of it. I want to see what Jesus wants to do with it.
Yeah. And I think that's a real struggle for us, because we go, I'm hurting and want somebody else to come and, oh, you're hurting. Let's hurt together. Yay. We love each other. We love Jesus. That's good. And we're here. And you leave the moment, you feel better because you've bonded in an empathy kind of moment, but you leave and nothing has changed. So you wake up the next morning, you feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books is by Dr. Mark Rutland, and it's called Courage to be Healed. And here's a couple of reasons why. The title in itself, Courage to be Healed, means that you've got to have what it takes to go and get the healing. And the second part of that is that he says that your healing starts at the altar and concludes in your therapist's office.
Yes, they're not separated.
No, and we want to separate those. Like there has been for a long time this big anti, like, I don't want to go, especially for men, like, we don't want to talk about our feelings, but we have deep feelings that we need to talk about.
Sure.
Like, our friend who's gone through 5 miscarriages, he needed to talk about some of this stuff. And I've had conversations with him about that and just sobbed with him. And sometimes healing starts just by sitting in a room and sobbing, but it's like, we're going to pray there. But then the next step was, hey, let's go sit with a counselor who is spirit-filled and love Jesus and can go, hey, here's how we can walk through this so that the promise of children, which God had given to them, you can keep going after that even in the midst of that pain. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Hey, Katie.
Hey, Seth. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm great. Or should I call you the other Equalize guy?
Well, it depends on where we are, but either will work.
Okay, cool.
So you're like neighbors with us now.
I am neighbors with you.
Like just across the hallway neighbors.
Right up there.
And like house neighbors.
And
Because
house
you live
neighbors.
right across the hill from me too.
I do. Right off the hill.
That's a lot of fun. So our first event together with Katie officially on the team here is what?
It is Fine Art. So I'm so excited to see everybody there. It is on April 21st through 22nd.
It's going to be a great time.
It
Hey
is.
guys, we'd love to see you there. Katie would love to see you there. Come say hi. Give you a high five. We'll cheer you on. Hope to see you soon. Peace.
Bye, guys.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey.
Want to play Frisbee?
Yeah, that's not frisbee. That's a disc. Like disco?
Disc golf.
Yeah, with chocolate cake cheese on everything.
It is a very nice disc.
It's great. It's Chris's actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But we can still play. You want to play?
I'd love to play.
Yeah. We can go play. We can play against each other
Okay.
at our singles Youth Alive disc golf tournament in spring sometime. Still working on that date. Yeah, it'll be
I
fun.
have to practice first.
Yeah, we got to practice. Let's practice right now.
Okay.
Let's do it. Don't tell Chris.
I'll toss.
Don't tell Chris.
I'll do a practice toss right
All right, Bet, let's do it.
Mom's going to have to do this in the office, but hey, we'll try.
Chris.
Kind of tying into, the heart breaking for people.
Yeah, this is a great clip.
This is a great clip. So we're going to roll the clip really quick, and then we're going to talk about it.
That's good.
Like, listen long enough to let your heart break for them. Like, if you look at a girl with blue hair walking through the mall and you're like, ugh, you need to find a person with blue hair and talk to them long enough that your heart breaks for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a great. I love this.
I love it when you pull my clips. It makes me feel special.
It's fabulous.
I'm like, I said something nice.
Yes, you did. You said something not only nice. You said something that seems in the moment like, gosh, Aaron, you're such a jerk, and then by the end of it, you're like, oh, you're brilliant.
I'm a brilliant jerk. I'll take
You,
it.
you need brilliant. It's just in the setup, and you said if you see a blue hair and you're disgusted, maybe you should go find a blue hair and sit with them and let your heart break.
I like how blue hair is a category. You're like, if you see a blue hair, it's
Yes.
like, what was that? What was the Dr. Seuss book with where they got like the stars on their bellies?
I have no idea.
The Sneeds. Was it the Sneeds?
Maybe. I don't remember. Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
This is where I need like a Joe Rogan computer guy to be like, can you pull that up, Jamie? Can you
Yes,
pull that?
yes. Jonathan, you'll have to start sitting in the
If you see-
computer
If
to
you
direct
see a
us there.
blue hair,
If you see blue hair, so
it's like a bird. If you see
we're
a
not
blue hair
we're
in
not
the
really
wilderness,
we're not necessarily talking about an older person. We're talking about like somebody young or different that's got
hip.
multicolor, hipster
Yes.
style hair, something like that. Let your heart break for that person. Like, go find them, sit with them, and let your heart break. Why is that so important?
Well, it goes into kind of what we're talking about in the last point a little bit, where like if you listen longer, you should build empathy for a person, and you should build so much empathy for those people around you that your heart breaks for them. Now, what Stephanie says when she shares her story, which is incredible, she is sick for many years,
Yes.
had back surgeries and all these other things. She thought God was going to heal her. He didn't. Blah, 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 blah. And so now she gets to this place where she's feeling bad for herself. Her mental health is in the tank. And the one thing she said that brought her out of it was empathy for people who were in situations like hers or worse than hers. And it gave her perspective. You did it. So all of that empathy gives you perspective. And a lot of times what pulls you out of a mental health funk, in the therapist's words, is perspective. That's what you're getting in therapy. That's what you're getting with moments. That's what you're getting with friends. That's what you're getting in time, is you're getting perspective.
Yeah.
You're allowing your point of view to shift. Anyway, so she was getting perspective from kids who are younger than her in worse situations than her. And then what happened is empathy led to gratitude, right? Empathy led to the perspective change. The perspective change led to gratitude. Gratitude leads yourself to being happy about your situation or appreciating your situation.
Okay.
So you go from hating your situation, you persevere to a place of perspective. That perspective takes you to a place of gratitude, and that gratitude takes you to a place of positive vibes, whatever you want to say, and good mental health. And then, guess what happens? Suck happens again, and you go through the same cycle. Right?
It's a perspective change.
So you have to figure out where you're at in the cycle and then get there. Now, the point that I was making is that it's very easy, instead of being an empathetic person, to be a correct person. To be somebody who's like, they're wrong, I'm right, and so be quiet and go live your crazy blue-haired life. But over here, I'm going to live this life. But even what that does, that pushing away, that energy that you're creating, is not good for your own mental health, because that's not how God created us, right? God created us to connect. Yeah. God created us to love. God created us in our core to share his love with those around us. So if we are not doing that, it creates a rub. And should I tell my fat person thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Here's my
in non-jerk terms.
All right. Well, okay. So one of my areas of growth in my life is the fact, I'm gonna look around the camera too. One of my areas of growth in my life is I have an issue with morbidly obese people.
And why is that?
And Shauna hates the fact that I share this. This is insecurity for me. I don't know why, or I didn't know why for a long time. But when I talk about morbidly obese, I'm talking about my 600-pound life. I'm husky. I don't have a problem with chunky people. I don't have a problem with fat people. When they can't move themselves, I don't know. I find it icky.
Okay.
All right. And I don't respond well. I don't like to be around people like that. I remember I was delivering a Grubhub order a couple years ago when I was doing Grubhub, and this guy couldn't make it out of the house. The note in the order said can you just bring it up to my door, which is super sketchy. I'm in the mountains, and so it's ding 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 ding, and I'm coming up, and he's sitting in his chair, and he's huge
on the front porch
in his living room.
Okay.
And he calls me at the front door when I knock the door. He's like, Can you bring it? I can't really move. Can you bring it in? And I held my breath when I walked in his house. I don't know if it stunk. I assumed it did. I'm a terrible person. I'm awful. Okay?
All right.
I promise this has a point.
Okay. Let's go. We're here. We're listening.
Okay.
We're listening.
So my wife told me correctly that that's a very jerky thing to believe. And she's like, you have no idea their story. You have no idea why he's like that. You have no, but me, I'm like, and I think what it was is one of my core values is discipline. I really value like structure, and I don't like, and I think a person who's living a lifestyle of undisciplined really is a turnoff for me. I don't like it at all.
Sure. Seems very chaotic.
Yeah, it seems chaotic, and it's why aren't you trying? Why don't you want better for yourself? And even I grew up in some areas that was kind of trashy areas.
Yeah.
And I didn't like being around any of those type of people. And so all that to say, when she was talking, my version of a blue-haired person is an undisciplined person.
Okay.
Right? And I don't have amazing discipline. This is the whole problem with us, is I'm not sitting here with a chiseled jawline and a six-pack. right? Like I'm not a freaking Marine who's like the epitome of a disciplined life, but it's easy for me to judge someone who's not. And what that stresses me out. Judging people stresses you out.
Absolutely does.
So the flip side of the coin, long way to get to the point, is if you find the person who gives you the most ick and you get to know them to the point that you can empathize with them and empathize with them so heavily that your heart can break for them, then you're closer to where Jesus wants you to be. And there's not enough room in your life to be that empathetic and that mentally poor at the same time.
That's really good.
Right? Like if all my energy and all my focus is, man, how can I love these people more? How can I understand and treat them with kindness and respect and share the love of Jesus? I don't have a lot of time to go like, but I really could use an Xbox, right? Like those things will be there, but again, it creates a different perspective in your life.
Sure.
And so that was one of the points she made. So for me with church people, it's blue hair was the first example I could come up with, because if you walk in some churches I've been to with blue hair, you're immediately ostracized, and then you're not listening.
Yeah. Any final things that you like want to close out and just drive home a point for us?
Okay, so I'll say this. This conversation turned into a workshop that I did at a church 2 weeks after.
Okay.
The 6 points are, read them off.
You have listen more. It connects you to the world around you.
That's 1.
Be honest with someone. Safe longer.
That's 2. We hit that.
Don't solve people's problems for them.
That's 3. I'll tell a story about that in a second. Go ahead.
All right. Number 4, when you hit a wall within yourself, do something outside yourself.
Okay, that goes with empathy. So basically what she was talking about was when you were struggling, empathize, let your heart break for people, which do something for somebody else is usually the best way to get you out of a funk.
Yeah.
All right, so if you're not in a good place, look for a place to allow God to use you.
Yeah, it's interesting when that happens. Like if you take enough time to step back, you see people who are going through similar. I mean, I remember
100%.
When I was going through divorce, I had 3 friends who were in the midst of a similar battle. I'm like, where in the world did this come from? But
sure,
I had the opportunity to share and to listen to them and to pray and to like work together through it, which is very interesting. So if you take that perspective break long enough, you begin to see that. Number 5 is, this is really good. Negative emotions are there for a reason. Feeling them is fine until they hinder your ability to function.
Yes. Okay. So we've kind of hit on that a little bit, and I just think it's a good practical point to make sure we drive home before we end the podcast. Is it's okay if you're sad. It's okay if you're stressed. You don't need medicine for everything.
No.
But if what you're going through is inhibiting the rest of your life, you've got to take some time to evaluate it.
Yeah.
You've got to get help. You've got to figure out what you're doing, because that's just a mudslide about to happen. So that was 5, and then 6 was let your heart break, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we hit most of those points. What we did was we took this whole conversation, I kind of boiled it down to those 6 points, and then we've actually do a workshop on it. I did a workshop on it. But one of the things that happened was point number 3, which is,
don't solve people's problems for them.
Okay, because we're not great listeners as a church, one of the things that we can do, and this is my favorite story of all time, that's happened in the last few months. We can try and pray for people, preach to people, do all those things that we said, right? But my biggest moments, her line that she said as a therapist was, a bad therapist gives you advice. A good therapist knows you already have the answers. The most formative times of my spiritual life were moments where pastors didn't pray for me. I prayed for myself. I remember going into when I was baptized in the Holy Spirit for the first time. We were at camp, and I walked down the aisle, and I was ready for the pastor to like Jedi mind trick it into me, just like, I was excited, but I was scared. I was nervous too, and I remember getting up there, and Pastor Scott Shiver, this old school pastor from Eastern Florida, comes up and he goes, hey, son, you ready? And I said, yeah. And I was like, hit me with it, you know. But he goes, all right, why don't you start to pray, and I'll pray with you.
Wow.
Right? But that's not what we usually do at church, right? But what is that doing? It's listening. It's being there, not solving somebody else's problem for them, right? So as a church, if we want to get better at mental health, one of the things that we have to do is allow people to persevere on their own, to feel their feelings longer, to talk longer. If you're a student, you need to be this kind of person with your friends, where you're not trying to solve their problem every time that they're trying to talk about their feelings. Be like, well, let me pray for you. That's a good thing, but let them feel their feelings for a little bit. A third of Psalms is lamenting Psalms.
Yeah.
A third of the book of Psalms is David just going like, God, this sucks. I don't know where you are.
Yes.
There's no flip at the end. He's just like, the end. That's it. It's awful.
Right.
Right? But we don't sing songs like that. You know?
No, we don't.
We don't pray prayers like that much. And so anyway, all this kind of came to a head a few weeks ago after we had this recording. A young lady came up to the altar at a church I was preaching at, and she was crying. And the pastor brought me over, and he told me that she's about 14, 15 years old. She was a soccer player in high school, typical blue-eyed, blonde-haired American girl type.
Okay.
And she was super upset because she had just got re-diagnosed with a disease that she thought God healed her from.
Oh, man.
So she's got to have another surgery in January, and she's got all these things happening. And I had preached a sermon on doubt, and she goes, everything that you said today, I felt, because I don't know if God, I believe in God, but I don't know why. I don't understand. And she's in that tension, that perseverance. She's not in a good place spiritually, mentally, emotionally, none of it. And so me as a good pastor, I come down, and what are the things that we say as pastors? You're a pastor. What do you say? What do you say in those moments?
Hey, sweetie, how can I pray for you?
Right? How can I pray for you?
And then you start pulling scriptures that you know.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 29:11.
He's got a plan, a purpose for you. You know, this isn't the end. Like, you know,
Right.
Don't worry. It might feel like a dark place. All these things, and I get ready to peace beyond all understanding. I'm getting ready to pray the prayer, and then God slaps him upside the head because we just had this conversation with Stephanie, and he goes, "Don't solve her problem for her. Listen, let her feel her emotion, and then point her to me." And so I said exactly what Pastor Scott told me. I said, "Hey, sweetie, I think you should pray. Do you think you can do that?" And she goes, "Yeah." And she prayed the most powerful 32-second prayer.
Oh boy, here come the tears.
I've ever heard. She starts to pray, "God, would you help me to know that you still love me? Would you help people to see light in my dark moment?"
Wow.
On and on and on. And then she's crying, but her tears start to change. Because now they become not just tears of like pity and woe is me and why is this happening, but but like when Jesus gets a hold of your tears, they change.
Yes.
Right? And her and Jesus had a moment that I could never have given her. Right? I can't fix her mental health. I can't fix her emotional or spiritual health.
Right.
But what Pastor and I did do is we listened and we prayed with her.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on one side of her arm. I was on the other side. And we said, "Yes, Lord. Yes, Jesus. We agree. Yes, Father. Lord, be with her." And we just prayed with her. And so she didn't feel alone. So as people, one of the ways for us to have better mental health is to really care about other people's.
Yeah.
And that story showed me that God can do more with a moment than I could do with 20.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's the point that I would drive home is, these are good points to remember. This, there's a lot that we can talk about with mental health and things like that. And wherever you're at in your mental health, just try and remember perspective matters. And when you feel like you can't, lean into God and find somebody that you can reach out to.
Yeah.
And that'll usually help pull
And
you
love
on.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Second Level Questions. We are super excited. A couple things we want to make sure you do. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell, do the notifications. Thank you, Aaron, for taking the time to have this conversation in the midst of your painting. And hey, big thanks and a round of applause for Jonathan Harbaugh back here for all the editing and stuff that he's doing. So, hey, we'll see you next time on Second Level Questions. Peace.
Bye.